Vasilisa Lukyanenka, you are a certified emotional intelligence and high performance coach and cognitive behavioral therapist. You arrived to emotional intelligence coaching through Zen Buddhism and the teachings of Eckhart Tolle and John Kabat-Zinn. You are currently exploring existential psychology, specifically logotherapy, which was created by Viktor Frankl, as well as Alfred Adler's individual psychology. You believe at the core of most people's problems is the lack of meaning in their life, and that each person is 100% in charge of their well being and happiness. Welcome, Vasilisa Lukyanenka. All right.
Thank you for this amazing introduction, Daniel. And thank you, guys, Daniel and John, for inviting me today. And I hope it will be a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. This was really interesting to find you. I literally just Instagram searched emotional intelligence, and your Vasilisa coaching came up, and I just loved it.
You're number one.
Hey. I didn't know about it. So
we found her, guys. If you're looking for the one to lead you to emotional intelligence.
The most emotionally intelligent person on the face of the earth. Vasilisa. No, that's not, she never said that. It's great to have you on here. It's definitely a topic that I personally am really interested in. I think the world is interested in it. I think it's at the core of a lot of what's going on in the world right now in other areas of study. And it just means a lot to have a discussion with someone who literally considers themselves an emotional intelligence coach. Like, I didn't know that thing existed, but I love it. So we're just really happy to hear it. It's been nice talking to you and hearing a little bit about your path.
Vasilisa, I was just in Costa Rica with my family. We were staying there and working, and part of that was part of the attitude that I found there was due in part to the fact that it was a surf town and people were outside a lot and they were like in the water and hanging out. Like, it seemed people were at ease and they were kinder to each other and nicer to each other. What's that like right now with you? And I got to say, that's in kind of opposition to what I'm feeling sometimes here in Portland, where it's not bad. It's totally not bad, but it's definitely like on edge. And I think people are on edge because of COVID restrictions and because of the kids are still not in school. They just kind of went back to school, but all that stuff. What's that like where you are in Krakow? Like, what's it feel like? Has the COVID been tough?
Well, yeah, it's been tough. And now finally the restrictions are being lifted up, and people actually are enjoying the things and appreciate the things more that they wouldn't before COVID, just going to places and walking without mask in the park because it's just been allowed like this really recently.
Yeah.
So yeah, things are getting better. So yeah.
Wait, so you're in Krakow? That's how you say it, Krakow?
Mm-hmm.
That's so funny. Yeah. So like 15 years ago, it was my dream to start dancing. Like, I had done like athletics in college and high school, and I was a runner and kind of burnt on all that, and had kept seeing swing dancing come up like just in life. Like, I would see it on a movie or something like that and love it. And so I was like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. So I went down, I just like somehow found this dance coach in my little town in Northern California. And it was this guy who was like 20, probably 20 something years old, super young guy. And he was like teaching Lindy Hop, teaching dance, and started taking his class. I'd walk down once a week and take this hour-long class. There was no Lindy Hop in the little town in Chico that I lived in. But once a week I'd go, and then, ended up traveling to other places and taking more lessons and blah, 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 going to convention type of things, weekends. Well, that guy and I have stayed in contact, and he's been very dear to my heart because I went on to like teach dance. Well, I had the opportunity to teach dance a little bit and dance a lot all over the world, generally through living in Portland, Oregon, which has an incredible dance scene. long story short, that guy now lives in Krakow, Poland, and has lived there for like 10 years.
Wow.
Lisa, we found your new dance partner.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
it's go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yeah, what I want to say that the world is such a small place because your story brought another story to me. I was attending a coach training course. The school is based in San Francisco, so it was, of course, a remote course. But I had a mentor coach who, like, literally recently moved to Poland, and now he lives in Warsaw. And we actually had a chance to meet a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
We're
wow.
starting a project together now. So, like, you never know, like, how things are happening and why they're happening. But
yeah, no kidding.
yeah.
One of the things, my wife and I have had a personal development brand for the last 5 years. And one thing that we found, a plus side of this COVID thing, is that if people are employed, which thankfully is there's still people who are employed. There are a lot of folks have like more bandwidth to explore kind of the existential dread, the feeling of like my life isn't quite right now. And COVID actually gave them the freedom to explore that a little bit more because they've got more time, because they're at home, they can work from home. They're not spending money on like gasoline or travel or those kinds of things. And we found a lot of people really looking forward to like trying to work through this kind of stuff. Is that what you have found too?
Yeah. Actually, speaking about like this, the change of reality during COVID.
Yeah, that's a good way to
Uh,
describe it. Change of reality. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like it's a new reality, and different people find their ways to adjust to it, you know. And so for some people, it's been transformational experience. For some people, unfortunately, it affected their mental health a lot. So
Yeah, totally.
it depends on how you perceive what is happening to you.
Well, and that's like kind of leads into one of the reasons why I was attracted to your work. And when we started chatting, after I first reached out, you pretty quickly mentioned Viktor Frankl and his book Man's Search for Meaning, which we have, we've just mentioned a lot on this show because I just personally think it's one of the most valuable pieces of literature or work that's ever been done, because he experienced, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my memory and understanding is that Viktor Frankl was captured in World War II, and he essentially was put into Auschwitz and I think a couple other camps. And then while he effectively going through what would be probably accurately termed a state of living hell, found that he was the one who had the one thing that couldn't be taken away from him was how he perceived what was happening to him, his experience of what was happening to him. And that ended up being, as I understand it, the at least the cornerstone of what I understood from that work, and an incredibly valuable, empowering tool and reality that people can have. Is that what you would say is accurate?
Yeah, it is. Exactly. And what I wanted to say is that, reality itself is neutral until we start judging it and deciding, oh, is it good for us or is it bad for us? And usually people sometimes even take for granted what is good and try to focus on what is bad, and finding like negatives, which makes like this this problem. And there is a thing that is called also Sunday neurosis. When they work and they don't think a lot about, okay, what's going on in their life, and they just do something on autopilot. But then when Sunday comes and they're questioning, okay, like, why am I not happy, or why am I uncomfortable? Because people are not used.
Well, I was just going to say, like you were mentioning COVID, and it's very easy. People's experience of it range. like, I'm not speaking to everybody out there. I know that people have experienced really hard stuff. The idea though is that Viktor Frankl was in Auschwitz, and he was dying, You're okay.
It's
It's
dog's
not a
fine.
big deal. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And that's like the idea there is that it's about as bad as it gets. And so how many times do we go through something that bad? Well, it's dependent on your ability to carry what is going on with you, right? Like if maybe Viktor Frankl had really big like emotional muscles, but the idea there is that, man, a person went through the worst of the worst, and he decided and realized that he could still be happy, because that was what couldn't be taken away from him. And how valuable is that? It just blew me away when I read it.
Yeah. Well, it's important to realize, to understand that once a person has this realization that, okay, it's me who decides how I interpret the situation that's in front of me, and then what emotional intelligence, where it comes and where it helps, what the emotions are about. Yes, for example, you're happy, or you're sad, or you're angry. It is just a signal about something that is happening in the outer world, because we rely on our senses. But then what you do with this, right? You just follow this emotion and stay with it, or take some actions which are not helpful, or you analyze, okay, I'm feeling this way because this is what is happening, but is it helping me? Right? And what can I do instead? What will help me? Let's say, okay, you are sad because it's COVID, you cannot leave your house, you start feeling depressed and so on. But here, where emotional intelligence can come into play, and you're asking, okay, I understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And at this stage, you accept your emotions. It's important to accept them, because we always think, oh, something is wrong with me, I need to stop it, right?
Totally.
And when you accept it, okay, you feel, okay, it's okay to feel it. But then the next step is, but what would help me in this moment, right? And you don't have to think, oh, I would like to feel happy and exhilarated. It's not possible. Yeah. Because there is an emotional range, and just being calm and satisfied and at peace could be a good place to be, instead of depressed, right?
Yeah.
Do you think
then you're finding ways how to get there.
Do you think that we can change our emotional responses, that are subconscious responses? Do you think we can do that?
Absolutely. And as you said, yes, they are subconscious responses. And so, like, what happens to us, and I can say that I'm my own laboratory. So I experienced it myself, and then, I'm bringing it to my clients. But when we have some emotion, it's subconscious. Yes, it happens in an instant. It means it kind of it doesn't go through a thinking filter. It's there. It just pops up. Right. like a bubble, on the top of the water, and on the surface of the water. And then, so what you do, it can be your wake-up call, and you become aware. You start viewing yourself as observer of, okay, I observe this emotion in me, and then you can dig deeper, and you will always find out why is it there, because it's been triggered by some reaction to something,
So
do you think that we need to figure out why it's there?
It's good to know, because very often it can be some old emotion, that for the first time you might have experienced it in childhood, and it somehow helped you, and you keep just repeating it,
right?
Especially when people have like social anxiety or something like that, and then they keep feeling it like for no reason,
Right. Interesting. I love what you talked about. The question is it useful? That didn't hit me. I'm 41, by the way, 41 years old, and that question didn't hit me around my emotions and around what I was experiencing internally until maybe only 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And I was going through a month-long, very intense, like, period where I was, number one, I was microdosing psilocybin, magic mushrooms. So I was taking a very, very small amount, but I was also meditating every day. I was also being very disciplined about my exercise, my sleep, my food, my hydration, my relationships, like the whole thing. I was talking to my doctor very closely. And the reason why was because I over my entire life, I've experienced this internal voice that said something to the effect of like, I'll never amount to anything. This kind of like commentator voice, like no matter how much success I had experienced in my life, whether it was in a workplace or in my relationships or as a father or with even my hobbies, lifelong hobbies that I had, I would have this voice telling me how bad I was at all of it and telling me how terrible I was, like I was never gonna like amount to anything. And one night I was laying in bed and the voice started again. And in the past, the voice would like adrenalize me. Like I would hear the voice of the existential questioning, and then it would like wake me up. And then I would like, of course, like not be able to sleep the rest of the night. Like I would just be in bed staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, wondering what the hell's happening with myself. And it wasn't until about that time where suddenly that question that you said so well, which was in my mind, is this helpful? Is this idea and is this voice helpful? And that was one of the greatest questions. And I hope by us telling this, saying this question out loud, it's helpful to someone else. Like that was one of the greatest questions I'd ever asked myself. Because I was like, oh, holy shit, no, it's not. This is actually like a giant waste of time, like a huge pain in my butt that I find very disturbing, like every time it comes up. And that really began to allow me to just notice when it came up, like notice that it was there. And I'm not sure if I would use the word accept that it was there, but just notice that it was there and be okay that it was there. And then ask myself the question, like, what would be useful in this moment? Like, what would be helpful? Have you ever had an experience like that?
About that voice, I think if you ask me or anyone else, everyone will say they have this voice. Like literally every human being lives with this voice, because we can say it is a voice of your ego, right? You're never enough, you're never good, you have to do this or you have to do that. And about that voice, I've been exploring quite a bit on that side, and I'm when I'm outdoors, I try to watch people if I have an opportunity. It's not that like I'm stalking people. Yeah, and I noticed such a situation. There was a little boy with his father walking down the street, and it gave me an idea where this voice comes from. Actually, it's not so much our ego voice. So, and they're walking down the street, and this little boy, maybe he's 3 years old or something. He trips over because the payment wasn't that even. He falls down. He gets up, dusts himself off, and keeps walking. And his dad is asking, "Why weren't you looking where you were going?" Bam.
Wow. Yeah.
This is where our negative self-talk comes from.
Wow.
And then you start asking yourself, why wasn't I watching what I was doing? I should have done this and should have done that. Because for that little child, it was not an issue. He fell down, he got up, he kept on moving.
Yeah.
This is like the pure nature of a human being, right? But then, like with time, we get all those messages from others.
Yeah. That's so interesting you said that, because when I started to notice how often that voice was vocal in my mind, I started to notice, like, well, what does the voice sound like? Whose voice does it sound like the most? Is it familiar to me? And it the voice became my father in certain circumstances. The voice became church leaders that I had as a child, or even friends that I had, like friends who I put on a certain pedestal. Like if I'm accepted by them, then I'm okay. If I'm rejected by these kinds of people, then I'm not okay. And so the voice changed. And often, just like you said, the voice was not only attached to a particular person, but to a particular instant, just like in the example you gave, where a moment of fear, of wanting to be accepted, of wanting to be loved, of wanting to be seen, wasn't exactly met, right? Like there was the fear that cracked open, the door opened and it came in. Have you ever had anything like that happen to you, Daniel? Like where you finally kind of identified like that inner voice or that negative feeling like attached to a particular instance in your life?
And I haven't, because my relationship with my emotional responses and inner voice is a little bit different. My inner voice is pretty awesome.
Nice.
But it's my conscious inner voice. Like my subconscious inner voice communicates to me through emotions. I don't have like a,
oh, interesting.
you know what I mean? And so the tape that I hear is one that I've created that's a very loving human, in my head. But the emotional responses I have are different, and sometimes. And so that's makes it a little hard to relate. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and I mean, like, a lot of sense. And Vasilisa, what you said about that voice coming from that father,
Yeah.
wow, like that, the first 7 years or so, like, it's like, be careful what you put into this little one, and I know if I was walking with a child at this stage in my life and they did that, I would roll with it like the child did, like not putting focus on something wrong or on the pain, like move through it as quickly as we possibly can and with as much levity, I suppose. It's not imposed levity, but just, and that feels good. But if I'm already wired, as an adult, then how much does parenting myself now with a kind inner voice change things, and that's what I've been focusing on more and more.
Yeah, and actually, usually this is the time when you are kind of reparenting yourself, let's say, right?
Yeah.
Because this emotional part is sometimes called your inner child, right? Because when you're a child, you are mostly trusting your emotions and acting on emotions. You either throw in a temper tantrum if you want something, or you want to please your parents, and so on and so on. So, and this emotional side can stay so strong and overriding everything we are doing that we will just feel we are not in control of our life. And then when we are reparenting our inner child, or this emotional side of us, it's like we are saying, we are accepting the emotions because they are there, they want to inform us about something. But then we are saying, okay, we've got it covered, you're safe, I will take care of it. This is what worked for me.
I've had to do this exact same thing, Vasilisa. I've had to literally reparent myself, like go back to memories through meditative states and running and other kinds of things, and like rewrite memories around specific detail. That's interesting. That's cool that you're doing that.
Speaking to that, Ron, like, I have never experienced what you're talking about so acutely as right now in my life, and it's been an incredible experience, because it's literally like my and I have the privilege to do this. Like, that's always a caveat that I have to say. Like, it's a massive privilege to have the time and capacity to be able to reparent oneself, and at least to the extent that I'm able to. I have a lot of freedom in my life. And with that said, I feel like there's a lot of responsibility. Like, you got a lot of freedom and privilege to do this, so you fucking succeed, and I've found that it's a long process, and that 5 years ago, I was experiencing a level of subconscious anxiety coming up because of The story that I have been going with is because of a pretty extreme childhood trauma when I was 4 years old. So this starts to come up and become conscious and overwhelming in my 30s. And there was no communication with these emotions. They were bullying me. They were running the show. And it was extremely intense. And I think a lot of people are on some level experiencing that, at least in my observation. Well, my point being is over time, and this is through like working with medication and working with therapists and just being mindful of taking care of myself and making myself or creating an environment where I feel safe in body and in psyche over years and learning what that looks like. So what I noticed in doing all of those things is there a gap started to grow between that bubble on the surface, instantaneous emotional response, and um, and I actually was able to work a little bit and get my voice, my conscious voice, that voice I said that I've developed. It's like a pretty good parent. Like that voice got to sneak in for a couple of seconds, and then it was too heavy and it would all fall apart and I'd get overwhelmed. But now I'm like 5-10 years through that experience. Well, I'm 10 years through that experience of being in contact with subconscious emotions. And now it's like I have a voice. I still mess up. I still get overwhelmed. I don't like win every argument. I don't like I can't always care for that part of myself, but I tell you, it's a different show now. And that is one of the most encouraging things I've ever experienced as a human.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In that process, Daniel, at what point did you begin to realize that there was some plasticity to your emotions, that they could change? And then maybe you were introduced to that idea of emotional intelligence.
It all happened I got overwhelmed 10 years
Yeah.
ago, and then I kind of like got myself under control,
Yeah.
and then it's come up a couple times, and it now comes up around romantic relationships. That's where
Interesting.
my stuff comes up.
I mean, I think everyone's got their place, right? Like some
Yeah.
folks are like my thorn to bear is like around career or relationship or parenting or my inability to have a child, or there's
Yeah.
my finances or something like that. And
Well, what it was for me, Ron, was it literally, I was walking one day in Portland, Oregon, 5 years ago. I was like, my friend and I joke whenever we're way off our path, we just like, yeah, we're in like the ninth dimension, we're just out there. I was in a relationship that was trauma bonded, that was codependent on my end as hell. It was not healthy. She was an incredible person. She totally had my back. But I was just walking on the street one day and severe to extreme anxiety. Um, and I just told myself, you're safe. I don't know why I said it. I just said, you're safe. And I noticed for 1 second, I felt safe. My emotions calmed and my nervous system chilled out. And I was like, oh my God. And then it was like, it all fell apart and I got overwhelmed again. But that was the first time. That was the first time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, at this point, like you and I have been talking, we've been friends for 10 years, and we've been talking about this emotional intelligence stuff for a while. I mean, I think that's a big reason we even started this podcast, was to talk about the way this is happening. And then we get to meet people like Vasilisa who are authorities in some ways in this stuff. Like what was going on in your life, Vasilisa, when you were like, oh geez, like this is like a key that I need in my life, and or at least like what was going on when you were wanting to share this?
Mm-hmm. Well, what I can say that I have such a feature, or I'm wired in such a way that I thought is not a blessing to have, but actually this was my blessing. And I'm HSP, highly sensitive person. And actually there are a lot of HSPs, and they are not comfortable talking about this, because what highly sensitive people are experiencing is they feel the world and they respond to the surrounding world more more acutely because they
Mhm.
sense everything more acutely, you know.
Yeah.
And
Is
but at
this
the
the
same
same as empaths or people who are highly empathetic?
can be, yes, but highly
Okay.
empathetic people are people who can just deeply connect and feel others.
Okay.
Yeah, but HSPs, highly sensitive people, like feel everything. You know,
Gotcha.
they can be
Interesting.
easily overwhelmed by light, by sound, or like, you know,
Okay.
yeah. And at the same time, I was very like my part, I was very sensitive, yeah, to other people's reactions. I could read people easily, and so on and so on. And my reactions were very acute as well, and not really controllable. And then I started searching, and I thought, oh, maybe something is wrong with people, you know, like very often we start with thinking something is wrong with others, not with me, right?
Could you give me an example? Like when you said you could read people, like I feel, I have a feeling you and I are probably pretty similar in some of this stuff. And that's probably what draws a lot of folks like you and I into the industry that we're in. But give me an example of like when you were like, okay, I'm feeling this feeling about a situation or a person or something like that, and you just realized you hit a bullseye.
Yeah, because you're reading their body language. When they're saying something, you can read between the lines, you know.
Yeah.
Because you're sensitive and you're feeling more. And it's not that like you have any special abilities. No.
Right.
You're just.
I like to think of it as special abilities.
Could be, right? And then but at the same time, it's too much information to take in.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And you get overwhelmed by it. And this was when my journey started, because I thought this is something that I can use to benefit myself. And then I was also recommended this book by my therapist back then. I was 18 years old, and it was by Elaine Aron, who coined this HSP, highly sensitive people idea. And it started from there. But still, I learned how to handle myself, but I was still thinking something is wrong with others. And then I decided to move cities, to change jobs. Then I moved even to China, to a different country where we had totally different people. But my story was kind of repeating in terms of relationships. And this was this like aha moment when I said, okay, it means something is wrong with me. and there is a saying, wherever you are traveling, you're bringing yourself with you.
Right.
So this was my case and my realization. And I started, and I stopped trying to fix the world. I started learning more about myself and seeing what I can change.
So Vasilisa, how can I ask, and maybe this is putting you on the spot too much, but where is an area that you feel like you're, you know, working right now in your life emotionally, and maybe having some successes, but also maybe having some not so much successes, like maybe a challenging area that is pushing you? Do you have anywhere like that in your life right now?
Well, where I have successes is I know what I feel, why I feel, and how to work with it. Exactly.
That's a good way to describe that. Yeah.
But what I also know is if you let the emotion override you, and it's like a train. If the speed is high, you cannot stop it. You have to you can try to slow it down by throwing things in front of this train, but you cannot stop it, otherwise it will break. So when in certain situations, when my emotion is at full speed, and being a highly sensitive person, it's a pretty tough ride. I just allow myself to stay in it. But every time as I told you, I'm my own laboratory. So I'm using different experiments with my emotions and with myself, which eventually takes me to getting out of that state faster. And and then I'm taking notes of that, and then
Taking notes, nice.
And bring it to my clients, and it works for them.
It's very interesting to me. You're doing something similar. The way you talk about what you do is really similar to what I feel like I'm doing too. And I envy you a little bit because you have a professional environment to help other people with this, and to do that through like the repeated articulation that can kind of be not systematized, but just repped out. I always like that term, just repped out, and I have a good friend of mine who works with troubled youth. He's a group home, like essentially supervisor. And I was living with him for a few years while he was working this job. And I saw him change and grow into an emotionally intelligent human, because he was on the floor all day with these kids who were just freaking out. I mean, they're all in really tough positions, and they're kicking him and biting him and spitting on him, trying to take out his knees, and he has to maintain adulthood and consistency and predictability and safety all the time, despite his own personal emotional response. And I just watched him grow up as a human. Like that translated to how he spoke to me, how he served as a mediator between a friend of mine and and it was just, I was like, how fortunate he is. And it seems like maybe and what the way I look at it is, my inner self is one of those kids tweaking, and to be able to be that adult and not get wrapped up into it. It's a little bit of a different game when it's your own mind, right? But I think it's analogous to some extent.
Yeah, true. And actually, all the description that you used, this is what mastering emotional intelligence feels like, right?
Yeah.
Growing up as a 30, 40, 50-year-old human. I mean, really, it's like, how old are we emotionally, and, I personally pretty young, I'm like a bratty little, a friend of mine told me that after what happened to me when I was 4, which is essentially losing a parent, I showed up at a person's house, and this is a person I know now, was 4 years old, and they said that you were like a little refugee, you were totally shell shocked and really struggling. And it's like, I have a picture of me from back in that time, and you can see it, and so it's really nice to have some imagery and be like, that's who I'm dealing with. And that helps me like conceptualize it and be there for it. And we had Stephen Barnes on a little bit ago. We haven't actually had an official conversation, but he's an author and another coach. And, same thing. Imagine that little kid and put him right by you, and you got to love him, and you got to be able to die for him. Like, you got to love yourself that much. That's how change happens. And what I'm finding right now in confronting what I believe to be as close to the core of my emotional issues as I've ever been is that's what it takes. It's like, put everything down, focus on your emotions, communicate with them, be there for them. That takes allowance, caring, responsibility, knowing. It takes everything you've got so far that you've worked on, get it all out there and prioritize this. And what I've discovered is you can grow, you can change.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah, no matter what. I'm the same way. Vasilisa, I got into this world because my parents, while they were religious, had a lot of difficulty in their relationships between the two of them. My dad and mom were married 13 times, which is kind of cultural to where my parents were from. It's kind of like a country music saga, the way that they had their relationships. They met in a bar, and like a lot of American Western men, my dad was not around. The father wound is like ubiquitous, right? Like, it's just like everyone's got it, no one's talking about it, or now they're finally talking about it. And then I found my salvation, if you will, like the way I could figure out life through religious context growing up. Like, that was church for me, going to church, and the way that people accepted me more and thought it was novel and cute that this young man wanted to talk about God and wanted to talk about getting healed or better, or whatever it was, like just being a better human. We had our own like kind of secret language around it, like our very specific churchy cultural language around it. And even as I've aged, and even as I have, my relationship with religion has changed a lot. My desire for healing and my desire to help other people has never waned, but it all essentially started with my own parental, upbringing, the way my parents were. It sounds a little like Daniel, the way what happened to him as a child. Like, can you kind of look back on your highly sensitive person understanding and your own world? Like, can you look back on your childhood and see like, oh, that, like, I see why I kind of got into this world?
That's interesting question. And yeah, what I can say, yeah, since childhood, I felt like I will be doing something different, because sometimes people just copy what their parents do, or believe what the beliefs that they are imposed on them.
Yeah.
But for me, it was no. I'm sure there is something more to more than what they're saying, and then there's more to life. And I used to be a bit of a rebel, because I wanted to pursue my path and just to experience the world my way, just for the sake of seeing what it will be like if I do the way I want to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it ended up to be quite an interesting journey so far.
That's funny. That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm curious, do you when you talk about, we were talking about logotherapy before, do you practice that? Is that like one of the main things that you practice?
Speaking about logotherapy, this is existential psychology, and this is something that resonates with me a lot, because I live by these principles. And when I encountered this theory and started reading, familiarizing myself with Viktor Frankl's work, it just hit it home. And then I started understanding more what I kind of knew intuitively and was doing intuitively.
Yeah.
Because I was prioritizing purpose and meaning. In my life, I was putting it first, because if I tried prioritizing other things, it never worked out, or it never felt right. And being a highly sensitive person, the good thing is you can never lie to yourself. You cannot say, oh, this should be good for me, because you know the answer. The answer is there. You cannot lie to yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe that. My wife and I have talked often about how we wouldn't have used purpose and meaning we wouldn't have used those words, but I could use those words interchangeably with how we I don't want to say categorized our life, but the way that we've put the priorities that we've put in our life, the inner journey, the inner healing, making sure that we are helping people, helping society, helping the world, being good parents. Like those are more important to us than career or earning money. And now we're realizing we made the right choice. It's given us the ability to be content and find purpose no matter what our circumstances, because we've been through really hard circumstances, and we've been married 14 years this summer. We've been in relationship for longer than that, and we don't regret how we've lived because of that. And I did find a lot of regret. Like I've had a lot of different jobs and things like that, and I was always, I won't say always, but often looking for purpose in those jobs. And I was sharing with you guys offline earlier that this last kind of 9-to-5 job I had was like, in a way, connected to me lying to myself. Like you were saying earlier, like you can't lie to yourself. I knew I shouldn't have been doing what I was doing, in the sense that I had created this idea of a reality that if I owned a cafe of some kind, that would work out in this bigger scheme, which is I wanted to have a place that I could take men in particular and coach with them. And I had this like super harebrained idea of that being in a cafe. I don't know why. It just seemed romantic to me. And then someone was like, well, don't start your own, go work for a company that does that. So long story short, I end up owning a donut shop in downtown Portland that was a part of another chain. And really what that meant was I was like on the ground, like boots on the ground, like running this business at 4:30 in the morning and going like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, this isn't what I want to be doing. I don't want to be unloading and loading donuts out of delivery vans. I don't want to be dealing with waking people up who are asleep in the stoop of my shop in the morning. I don't want to have to be dealing with employees who are not showing up, or employees who are coming in drunk, or whatever it is. And I was like, this is not my lane. And I was just like showing up every single day with this like just insane sense of dread, like this insane sense of like, I'm off. I've really lied to myself. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the experiments I've been doing relates directly to that, Ron, and I'm curious what you think and what you think, Vasilisa. Which is, if you're having an emotional response that's saying, don't do this, like I'm freaking out, I'm getting scared, I'm anxious, but that part of you that is having that emotional experience, is a traumatized part. And let's say you believe you can change your emotional responses, then what feels like a message saying don't do this is actually like listening to a kid who doesn't really know what the big picture is. And so what I'm experimenting with right now is allowing those emotions and being like, I know you don't want to do this, but like, trust me, it's good. We just got to do it maturely. And I'm finding that I think there might be something to that. I seem to be succeeding in this experiment so far. At the same time, it's fucking hard, like it's not fun. It would be so much easier just to like do something that has less stakes. But I also am considering, since it's an experiment, that I could be dead wrong and that I'm just doing something that's going to cause suffering. Do you have anything to say about that, Vasilisa?
Yeah, what you are actually talking about is mentioned in logotherapy, and Viktor Frankl mentioned courage a lot in his book, and I'm sure Daniel, you also remembered, might relate and remember this. And so he's saying that it's not about not having fear, because fear will be there, but it's about having courage to do things anyway, in spite of fear.
See, and that's the thing is, in Ron's story, I don't think either of us or anybody would say, yeah, sorry, man, you did the wrong thing. You should have like been courageous in the face of that misery, But in my case, I feel pretty confident that I'm doing the right thing, and it's hard, but it's right. And so it just muddies the waters when it comes to, emotional intelligence, right? You got to listen, but it's not always that they're the boss either,
Yeah, I think part of it is something that Stephen Pressfield, who I've mentioned so many times during these podcasts, is he calls moments like that like our shadow career, or something that we use as a smokescreen for the thing that we should really be doing. And he goes in description, and he's on a bunch of different podcast episodes around, and he's got a book. I'm looking at bookshelves up here, by the way. He goes on about how we can get ourselves into a situation pretending, like trying to convince ourselves it's the right one, even though because it's safe, or because there's less risk involved, or because it's socially acceptable. And I think that's what I was experiencing, was like I was looking for a kind of safety and a kind of social acceptability, and I would also say status, right? Because it's like, to own a hospitality business in this town is kind of its own little status thing. And for me, that was not the right move. For others, it's exactly the right move. It's exactly where they should be.
Where they should be, and potentially with very similar emotional experience.
Exactly. I think that's totally right. That's totally right. Like, you can have the signals going off, like your warning lights in your brain or your soul going off, and the same warning sign can mean something different to a different person.
Exactly. And I spent the weekend with someone recently, and they were telling me how they were not an analytical person. They were kind of giving me a little shit for being analytical myself, because I'm pretty analytical. And um, and I was like, we didn't argue about it or anything like that. I was just kind of listening, but I did realize that if you can focus the analytical part of your brain, there is a lot to be gained by understanding what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, like you were saying that you have a pretty firm grip on Vasilisa with yourself, why you're feeling something, that you're feeling something, maybe a label of what that emotion is, because if you take all the labels off of emotional experiences, some emotions are really similar experiences. I've experienced, for example, like lust or sexual desire. When I like take away why I'm realizing or feeling that, sometimes it's very similar to anxiety, and like there's like a different form of anxiety. My point is that like emotions are very fluid, and there's a lot of gray between them, and understanding that. And I just think that it's one of the best things that I've like started doing in my life. And it's a hell of a process, don't get me wrong. Like my life doesn't look like this perfect sparkling thing, but it certainly feels like it's being more authentic. The sign is being cut, and my well-being and quality of life is improving. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And actually, when you are speaking about the analytical part and then the emotional part, because we can play with analytical part too much, but rationalizing things and proving things to ourselves. So like there is this analytical part, emotional part, and then like your conscious, which is unbiased. You just see things for what they are,
That would
and
be
then you use
ahead.
emotions and analytics as your tool. Yes.
It sounds like the phrase emotional intelligence is a little bit contradictory, right? Like to have an emotion and then to use intelligence. Like what's define that for us? Like your idea of emotional intelligence and how you describe it to your clients.
So how I describe it to my clients, and how Daniel Goleman, the father of emotional intelligence, describes it, it's being aware of your emotions and knowing how to handle them and knowing how to control them, and being aware of other people's emotions and how to deal with them, how to respond to them, how to change them or to guide them in a different direction. So it's not only about your emotions, but about your interaction with others. So it's more than only about one person.
It reminds me a little bit of what we were talking about before we started recording, which was that some what people would consider more masculine attributes of human psyche are you and please like correct me if I'm wrong. We're essentially saying that some of those attributes are more could actually lead to emotional intelligence being like kind of achieved more. What were you saying around that?
Yeah, so because when you are learning emotional intelligence, unfortunately you are learning as a subject to some extent, because it involves observation, analysis, and then taking steps, some experiments, just to see how it makes you feel different, so that you are rewiring your brain, like you are using this neuroplasticity which a human brain has to benefit, right? And men, like typically versus women, have more skills to do this, because it's in their nature to analyze, to plan, to predict, and so on. But there are HSP, highly sensitive people, men as well, and I've had a lot of clients who had more feminine than masculine in them, although they were men. So it's not that black and white.
That's why I phrase it as masculine attributes of the psyche, and even that is still a metaphor. Like we had Tracy Hunter on. Was such a fun conversation. That's the one that you listened to, right? Yeah, and she has like she'll degender attributes of the psyche and just put them into categories that have nothing to do with gender. And I really like that. And I feel like one of the things I'm doing is taking away these gender labels and gender metaphors from things, because they just seem like they're falling short right now in a lot of different ways.
I think part of it is people have created too hard of boundaries around those phrases.
Yeah.
Masculine, feminine, right? Like it means this as this. You mentioned, Vasilisa, before the use the phrase stereotypes. And I think it's a really good phrase to use around these things, because they're hard definitions that aren't exactly right, but we use them anyway. You know, a stereotype of a personality type or of a country or of the behavior around certain people or certain things. Like, it's easy for us to create these stories, is what a stereotype is, right, around a certain kind of experience. And gender roles or maybe even attributes can get lumped into that, and we're tired of, people are tired of this bullshit and want to change it.
Yeah. And Tracy Hunter, she actually has one word that, and I don't want to speak 100% for her,
Yeah.
but my impression was that she has one word that she can describe masculinity with, and one word she can describe femininity with. And don't get me wrong, like, she would tease that out in a million different ways, I'm sure. It's just, if you wanted to boil them down to one word, she had that tool too, and it was autonomy and connection. And autonomy being like, Ron, you want to guess which one that would be? And connection being the other. And so connection, feminine; autonomy, masculine. And I do like removing the labels and having like, what do we really mean by that? But even that becomes problematic, because I feel like as I say certain things, judgments are associated with each one of those attributes. So the whole thing, this just seems really problematic and sketchy.
I mean, it is problematic and sketchy, and you know, in one instance, like, I would actually, by my behavior, by the evidence in my life, I would probably say that I'm more connection driven than driven towards autonomy. And maybe it's because I listened to a lot of The Cure as I was growing up. I don't know. I was really into that stuff. And my wife is actually more autonomous, and that is probably a result of how my mother was and my father was, and that kind of thing too. But I get it. I totally get where it's happening, but I also get why it's so sticky. You know,
Tracy was talking about herself as being naturally more masculine, and she was developing her feminine side, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Do you work with those terms a lot, and the idea that if we were to use the metaphor, that we both have opposite sex aspects of ourselves, if we were saying it was just opposites, which I know it's not.
Yeah. No, I cannot say that it takes place in my practice. You know, I try not to separate those, because I take every person as, you know, as a clean slate, the way they are, and then we work with what they have.
So essentially, you're not looking at their gender at all.
No.
That's awesome. See that? No, seriously, I'm not like just trying to agree. Like, I think that right there is what's being created in this world. Like, we're just looking at gender less. It's also breaking down within itself, and it's just all kind of like going away in a way, but also being respected in wherever one person has landed, you know. And it's awesome. It's beautiful.
You know, it seems like for the past, let's say, since you mentioned Adler before, and Frankl. What were the years that Frankl was active? Like up until the 50s? Is that right?
Yeah. Something around that.
Yeah. So now we're roughly 70 years since then, right? And it seems like we're kind of experiencing these like accelerated periods of more emotional intelligence, people understanding the childhood roots of attachment and trauma and how they affect us into adulthood. What's your like your greatest hope for the future as a coach, and what you're seeing is possible? Because what I'm hearing is possible from Dan is like, change is possible, And I've experienced in my own life, the men that I coach have experienced saying like, what are you seeing? What are you excited about for your clients in the future?
Yeah, the same as you just mentioned, change, and what I see that people, become more and more separated from each other, although at the same time they are all longing for more connection.
Yeah.
And so this is this paradox that is like more and more acute with each day. And so because people, as we say, we hurt ourselves with our thoughts, with our interpretation of what is going on, because and then people build up those barriers and think the world is out to get them, and so on and so on. And what I'm working on with my clients is to teach them that once you open up, the world starts opening up, because the world is your mirror, kind of.
Wow.
What you translate into the world, you get back. It cannot be that you are translating mistrust and then expecting people to come and trust you and be open and connected with you.
Right.
It starts with you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It reminds me. I share something kind of personal. I wrote this. I hardly ever write poems. Like, it's just not what I do anymore. I used to do it a lot when I was younger. But the other morning, I spent like an hour or two in this pretty dreamy space before I was waking up. It was at dawn, and I had this image of a castle, and I played around with it a lot in my own like personal mythology in my inner world. I definitely inhabit a castle, and been fascinated by that by castles in general since I was a kid. So it's become kind of the way I see where I live in my inner world. Long story short, I was like, a castle is the way that I love. It keeps people out when I want them out, and it holds them in when I want to hold them in, and that's just like a very basic interpretation of that. And I could go into that more, but that's the gist. And I was like, that those walls are thick and high, and they've been built for good reasons. And I see what one thing I'm going through personally right now is that castle coming down. And this is what this poem was about, is this castle coming down, and the way that I love coming down, and it's like now in ruins, it's rubble, But what's really nice about that, and this is Viktor Frankl a little bit, what's really nice about having, to some extent at least, I'm sure I'm being a little bit hyperbolic and dramatic, but is that what's great about it being decimated, even though it's hard, is that there's opportunity to start again. And what this poem ended up being about, and it involved a garden and a statue and all this, like, kind of like, I got into the gist of like my inner world and some symbology. But the gist is that there's a new structure being built. And like in my inner world, one thing I'm doing is taking all this rubble and using the raw resources, organizing things, and rebuilding a structure that is in the image of how I believe love is possible. And it's a much more open structure, and there's vast walkways that lead inside and through, and there's just a lot of air and space, and water can flow, and light can come in, and things can grow. And it still had all that with a castle. There's still a courtyard, and things can grow in that courtyard, but it's contained, is the point, And it was a really beautiful experience doing that. And it was very therapeutic also, because now I can conceptualize maybe what I'm personally going through, which doesn't really matter the details, but it's like, that's what's going on. It's a falling and a sorting out, recognition of what I have raw materials wise, no judgment, and then a rebuilding in a new image. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. And this is the only way, we can change the world, by rebuilding like our castle, into something that serves not only us,
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really great. Vasilisa, where can people find you? Like what's the best way to get a hold of you or find your work or see more of what you do?
So I have a website where I have my blog, and people can read and get some ideas and insights and tips. It's vasilisacoaching.com.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, Instagram. I'm present there a lot.
Yeah.
My stories and also my Instagram blog.
I saw your post today. You were doing yoga, I think, or you were in a yogic pose.
Yeah, I was meditating.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's really cool. What's the name of your Instagram account?
Yeah, as well, Vasilisa Coaching.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's so cool. Well, you're a great gift to us to get to talk with us. We really appreciate it. You bring a lot of intelligence and thoughtfulness to this. Thanks for sharing your background. I'd never heard of highly sensitive person before. I was excited to hear about that. And it's obviously you're the real deal. I was like, this is badass that we got someone like her speaking with us today. And also I have this like real sense of what a gift it is that you're helping people on earth, like that you're out there doing your thing and creating healing journeys for all kinds of folks that are finding you. That's so cool. That's really, really neat. And now we get to kind of link arms together and help more people together. How cool.
Yeah. You know, when I started doing this, it felt like I have no choice. It's just what I have to do.
Yeah. That's so
like
good.
I'm home. I arrived,
Yeah. That's funny you mentioned that. I experienced something recently. It was like the umbrella under which everything else exists now is clear.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe that too. Well, cool, guys. Appreciate everybody coming today. Thank you so much, Vasilisa. And we will make sure to have links to your stuff in our show notes. And, anytime we can be of service to you in any way, we're happy to reach out to you and speak with you, Vasilisa.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys, for inviting me today and having this amazing conversation.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Yeah. Awesome. Likewise, if I can be of any help.
Yeah, you already have been. It was amazing today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Welcome to the Field Dressing. We had Vasilisa, emotional intelligence coach, with us today. Obviously, she's extremely intelligent. Obviously, extremely emotionally intelligent.
Yeah, she knows what she's doing.
I feel like such a knuckle dragger around someone like Vasilisa or Dr. Tracy for that matter.
Really? Do you?
Yeah, I totally do. Yeah.
Wow. I don't feel that way at all.
I'm laughing because I feel like I'm like the ape that's like just barely sparking the stones together.
Come on, man. You're being falsely modest. You can follow this stuff better than most people. And I'm gonna own it, man. This is what I want to do and the conversations I want to have. And I feel like she's speaking the languages we're learning, and she's definitely further along, undoubtedly, and she's professional and she's helping others on a daily basis. Like, she's doing the thing, right?
Yeah.
But you get what she's saying.
Oh, I totally get it.
I get
it, but like I think my inner man feels like a knuckle dragger. Like I've learned to speak the language, but it's kind of remember those commercials where it was the Neanderthal like dressed as like a modern man. I think it was like an insurance commercial or something.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying my ability to execute is like anywhere near what she's doing, but I hear what you're saying, but also, man, like I know you, man, you're doing a lot of good work in your life, and it's on par with anything she's talking about.
Appreciate that, dude. Thank you.
Yeah.
The couple of things we talked about, we jumped through there was emotional intelligence. I don't think we talked about emotional sobriety during that, but we were kind of talking about it beforehand. But then emotional agility, right? And I'm really glad she brought up, I think his name is Daniel Goldman, the guy who kind of coined the phrase emotional intelligence. And she had said it's like the ability to own your emotions, handle them when they come up, recognize them in other people, and then have a game plan for what's going to happen when they're coming up in other people.
Wow.
And so let me tell you a funny story. Years ago, there was a guy in my neighborhood who started to mentor me through hunting and archery. And and fast forward a few years, I ended up hiring his daughter at actually the donut shop that I was telling you about. And I was like, oh, I know your dad. He's a cool guy. And she's like, he's kind of cool, you know, and kind of giving me these like signals that she doesn't want to talk about it, that it's like too difficult and like whatever, don't really think much of it. Fast forward, I wasn't in contact with this person, but my daughter ended up in his apartment building, like the hallway, like, you know, a lot of apartment buildings in this neighborhood, with a bunch of other little kids, and she didn't have a mask on. And this was kind of like maybe last September. And so I get this text message from this person berating me just over and over again about how dangerous it is to let my daughter out without a mask. And I get it. I'm like, oh, he's mad. So I apologize. So sorry. I, you know, go into accepting responsibility, going into apologizing, you know, saying it's not going to happen again, all those things. And then it just continues, like, and after I apologized, even after I had accepted responsibility, didn't try to make any excuses. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. At this point, I'm having dinner with my wife, and we're on a date at a nice restaurant here in town. And my phone is just blowing up with this person. He is like laying into me and won't stop. And I did one of the most gratifying things I've ever done on my phone, which was to open up his contact details and press this little button that says block. And I blocked that individual from contacting me. And that was about a year ago. And this last Sunday, I was at the archery range, and he shows up. And I have not seen him since then. And there was a part of me, Daniel, that was like, oh shit, here it comes. Like, I'm like, is this about to go down? Right? Are we about to have like bow and arrow duels?
Exactly. Like for that to happen at a place, for that to happen at one of the few places and situations where you could actually easily kill each other from a range silently and probably get away with it. I've been to that archery range. If you're the only two there, you aren't going to get away with it.
Well, thankfully there was a lot of other people there.
Okay.
But there was a part of me that wanted to like straight up run away, right? Like I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And I didn't. I just stood I didn't stay my ground in the sense that he was confronting me, but what I didn't hide. And I tried to make eye contact with him and like kind of give him a wave. And he wouldn't. Either he didn't notice me and didn't acknowledge me, or he did notice me and decided to not acknowledge me. And so I stayed for another 15, 20 minutes and shot my rounds and like got back in my car. And I even like walked to my car really slowly in case he wanted to come over and talk to me or something. And I got away, and I was just like, I don't know what to do with that. Like, do I allow that? You know, it's weird that there's still residue from that emotional interaction,
you know,
a year later or something.
The
right?
tricky part of that though is that it's a year later. He's been blocked the whole time.
Yeah.
See, exactly. Check it out. Yeah, he might have texted you 6 months ago being like, listen, man, I was having a really hard time. I'm so sorry about that. My bad. And you never would have gotten it. So
I know.
That's a dick.
I know. He could be feeling all kinds of like judgment. Who knows around that? That's
block people temporarily, not permanently.
Okay. Should I unblock him?
No, I'm not saying for you to do that. It's just like a little slogan that I do. I'll block someone for a while, but I one time, you know what, this comes from experience. One time I accidentally left someone blocked this last summer, like about a year ago. And I didn't realize it. And I was like, why am I not hearing from this person? Like, we had conflict, but we should be okay.
Yeah.
And didn't hear from him. And I was like, wow. And then I somehow learned, 3 or 4 or 5 months later that I had blocked the whole time. And it really slowed down our ability to come out of it, which we finally did, and made a joke out of it because he knew I'd blocked him,
Does the other person see a sign that says like you've been blocked?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Did you tell him? Did you tell that person like,
I apologize profusely. It was a temporary thing,
Oh,
It
interesting.
was a good move in the moment, but I did
Yeah.
not mean to continue it.
It's a funny, years and years ago, I was hanging with a friend of mine, and he was in the middle of a pretty tough business conflict, like really tough. It was kind of one of those moments for this guy where this was the topic of conversation every time we were together, was this like real bad conflict he was having in the business he
Yeah.
owned. And he and I are talking, and he sends a text message to this person based on a conversation he and I had. It was him like really trying to reach out and create a bridge and create some resolve to this. And he gets a text message back that just says, "I'm sorry, I can't talk right now," which is one of the 3 auto responders that comes back, right? Well, my buddy saw how fast it was, and didn't realize it was an autoresponder. And so he had this like well of like anger and resentment, just like I saw it like for a freaking Disney character, like Jafar, just like it's here it comes. And before he could cast his like dark secret magic spell, I stopped and I was like, "Hey man, I don't think he meant anything by that. I think that's just his like where his thumb landed on the autoresponders." And you could see the darkness like leave his face as he realized what was going on, and realized he didn't have to take it personally, and was like, "Oh." And what's funny is we continue to hang out. I think we were doing some woodworking together in his garage, and he, like minutes later, it's like some amount of minutes later, like 10 minutes later or something, he's like, "Oh God, Ronnie, thank you for saving me with that one." Like
Wow.
I was getting worked up, and I had this whole story
Yeah.
created around that.
Yeah.
And it just was him, like he was in a meeting.
That's the thing, man. How many, one of the most heartbreaking parts about living in this world is knowing how many misunderstandings happen, And I think that ergo, right, that one of the best things that we can do as people, I mean, one of the most helpful things is our resting state somehow being that an understanding it's not about me, it's not personal place, as opposed with anything,
Yeah.
as opposed to hair trigger, take it personally. That switch and shift right there, I think would help. I whatever about other people, it has helped me, because it's usually not personal, and when it is, that'll reveal it. I don't know. Maybe it won't reveal itself, but like I feel like, let's say 9 times out of 10, for argument's sake, or even if it's 6 out of 10, more often than not, it's not about us. It's not about me. It's not personal. So let's just assume that.
Yeah. I think that's a really smart phrase. I like the words you just used, the hair trigger.
Yeah.
That's a very Western phrase that my dad kind of had on lockdown, because he was a kind of self-taught gunsmith. And a hair trigger is like the actual mechanism of a rifle or a pistol that feels like you just barely touch the trigger, and the gun goes off.
Yeah.
And he really prided himself on like how he could get the pull, that's what they call it, the weight on the pull, down to like almost nothing on his hunting rifles.
Jeez.
And I almost think we lose the connection with what that phrase means, hair trigger, because it's an explosive, dynamic, dangerous, destructive reaction after hair trigger. And I think that's a good way, like to kind of not recoup, but to reclaim, like, oh, this is not, like when you say hair trigger about our emotions and our anger in particular, like, that's it's meant to be emphatic, and it should be emphatic, because there is danger on the other side of that.
That's what Vasilisa was talking about when we were all discussing how automatic emotional responses can be, right? Like that's a hair trigger in my estimation. It's like it didn't take hardly any effort for that thing to go off, and now it's my primary experience in this world.
Right.
For me, at least, when my emotions come, they generally come pretty strong.
Yeah.
At least around the topics we're talking about. And man, what do you do in that stage? And what she said and what you reiterated here about recognizing when they're happening in someone else,
Yeah.
and then and maybe at the same time happening in you, like that's a place where I would like to get to, and have had very few successes recently. But they're starting to come, which is I'm upset. And I was in a therapy appointment the other day, and my therapist, this therapist said that when you're up around a 7 of anger or anxiety, your IQ drops 20 to 30 points.
That's crazy.
And yeah, it's crazy, right? And on top of that, you're also now experiencing life through the lens of whatever part of you is that pissed, possibly a traumatized part, which means possibly a younger part. So
Interesting.
it was just like, that is not the time to be doing any thinking, you know. Even if you take a break from that, you're super triggered and pissed. Even if you have the wherewithal to be like, this isn't a good time for us to talk, and you do get away, even at that stage, he was like, don't be reflecting on this situation. It's not the time to do it.
Oh, wow.
It's just like, what a great piece of advice, you know. It's like, that's when you get into your body, that's when you ground, that's when you exercise, that's when you do something out of your head.
What was his advice on, like, when do you deal with that stuff? Like, how do you come back to resolving it?
Oh, just when you're, you know, when you're not
triggered.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You know, you like you know, your powers are back up. I don't know.
I remember the first time when your life bar is full
Yes,
health.
man. Yeah.
I remember the first time I had kind of like my physical outburst, like healthy outburst to anger. I was like in high school and fighting with my girlfriend, and I had a like one of those like 1980s like workout machines in my room that like you put it down on one angle, it's a row machine. You like set it up at a different angle, and it's like a bench press machine. That was my stepdad's, and it had been sitting in my room my entire life. I had never touched it. And about 14, 15 years old, I get in a fight with my girlfriend, and I just go over there and I just rip out a bunch of like, who knows what exercise I was doing at the time, but it worked. It physically worked. And I was like,
there you go.
Oh, there's this thing between our bodies and our nervous systems and our emotions. Of course, I wouldn't have said those phrases exactly, but oh, I feel better. I was mad. Now I feel better.
You know, but it's complicated, right? What if you're like injured or you can't really do anything? You know, then what do you do? Well, then you like take a shower. I don't know, you know, like just getting out of the mind and letting the emotions like work, you know, go away and fade. It's hard, man. I mean, that's why one of the things I'm concentrating on right now, as far as emotional intelligence is recognizing that the anger that I experience in conflict is the red line, is like that's the far end of a spectrum. That over here on the other side, there's experiences I have that they're not angry, but they're keyed up a little bit. You know what I mean? And there's like, I can pretty clearly feel in the course of conflict, maybe 4 or 5 stages of distinctly different emotion, but that all are leading to anger if I'm making choices and escalating. It's the real deal, you know? And so now I can connect that the consequences of speaking from anger to way over here, very manageable choices, emotional experience that I can choose a different way and calm down. It's not overwhelming yet.
Yeah, that's so good. That's super good. Well, dude, thanks for finding Vasilisa. She was a real great gift, like gem to have on our show. And I think that's only continued and deepened our conversation around emotional intelligence. I appreciate that. And as always, good to see you, man. I'm glad that we get this gift to do this together.
Thanks, my friend. It's been great, really.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. All right. See you next time.
Adios.